Thank you for being here today for our first budget hearing. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order.
Councilmember Collazo.
Present.
Councilmember Dieguez.
Here.
Councilmember Fernandez. Councilmember Garcia.
Present.
Councilmember Present. Vice Mayor Alvarez is absent and Mayor Sid is absent. We have quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. If you can please rise for a prayer led by Councilman Josh Dieguez.
Everyone, please bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the gift of life, and thank you for having us all gathered here today to decide, for the first time at least, a review of our budget. Please guide us as we prepare to make important decisions that will affect our community for many years to come. With that, amen.
Amen. If you can please stay on your feet for the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilman Garcia. Thank you. You can all be seated. Next on the agenda, I have the order of business. Any deferrals, additions, or deletions to the order of business?
I do.
Council member?
Yes, Manager Peterman.
On 2 nights ago at the regular council meeting, we received direction from the council to make a change with the security service for the Loch Lomond Neighborhood Service District. We have a recommendation, so it'll be a package of 2 resolutions. One following through on the motion that was made on Tuesday night to terminate the services of one security company. And then we have another resolution, which is the recommendation on how we plan to backfill for that security company.
So would you like to add this as item 7C on the agenda?
Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yes, Town Attorney.
Yes, because of the way that our rules work, and this would be considered kind of this would be considered a regular meeting because it's a budget hearing. So the 4-day rule kind of applies, does apply. That being said, this is one of those funky items that you instructed us to come back. It's timely. It's necessary, and it's something that was discussed at the last council meeting. So it is a new item, but it's a new item that was already discussed. It was asked of you for us to come back. The contract that's before you for consideration is one that has already been publicly vetted. It is an existing contract that the town has. We are doing an amendment to that contract and proposing an amendment to the contract to add an additional service. So in order to be completely sound, and for this to be mean to be sound, what I would recommend is that there is a vote waiving the 4-day rule, allowing these 2 items to be adopted into the meeting, and also incorporating the discussion that you had on Tuesday, and then moving forward with the adoption of the items, so should you wish.
Thank you, Town Attorney, Deputy Attorney Lorenzo Corbeia, for that advice. I'm really going to weigh on my colleague, Councilman Dieguez. This was something that he brought forward, and I'm thinking the other alternative is to do like a special call meeting with more notice, with the other. This is not our only option. This is one option that we can take care of this right now. And then the other option would be that we would have to do a special call meeting, correct?
It's your call.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to defer to Councilman Dieguez. Dieguez, I know that you've been working on this issue. I know you've been working with the community. I know you've actually been working with possibly seeing what alternatives are out there. So I'll go ahead and see how you want to handle the matter.
Well, look, and I don't know if you guys can hear me because it kind of feels like the.
I think when there was feedback, they lowered the volume on mine as well. So I think
Okay, so I'm gonna try. checked, and maybe we'll figure out our audio issues. Huh?
Check, 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 check. I think they're all down.
Testing, testing.
Hello?
Hello? Hello?
You don't hear me, no?
Hello, hello.
Oh, Lord. How about now? No, yours seems to work. What's going on, Ed?
For the record, I hear all of you.
Hello?
She says she hears all of us, but we can't.
Mita, can you hear me? Claudia? No?
Hello? Hello?
I can hear you on Zoom.
Councilwoman Ruano,
You're
can
welcome.
you hear us?
Yes, ma'am, I can.
Oh, she can hear me, and she can hear you.
I can hear all of
It's in
you.
the council chambers, at the mic right. She can hear us, and she... Thank you.
Test, test. No.
Slide over here.
Hello? Test,
Oh, whatever. So this is what it feels like to be the manager. Okay. Can you hear me now better? Still?
You just sounded like Verizon commercial.
Hello? Hello? Nothing?
It's the in-chamber volume.
Yeah, because I think our residents can't hear me. Can Yeah, you gotta love it, huh?
Look at my text.
Testing, testing.
Testing, testing.
Testing,
Alright,
testing.
I think we're all good.
Testing, 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 testing.
Testing. Testing.
Hello? Okay, there we go.
All right, we're good.
Give me 1 second. Well, look, I do think that based on what we saw and heard on Tuesday night, the main thing that the residents of Loch Lomond are looking for is to have a change in the Gargate services, whether that happens tonight or whether that happens at the second budget hearing, just to give them a great opportunity to digest this. I'm going to defer or fall on the side of waiting for the second budget hearing to give them an opportunity to digest this. However, with that said, I would like, if possible, at least to discuss it a little bit, put some key points on the record, so that, as Mita and others goes back to her community, they can speak with them about what are going to be some of the changes that we're considering in advance, right? So they can chew this up and perhaps give us feedback through email, through calls in advance, if that's all right with my colleagues.
I think that's a great suggestion. I mean,
Yeah.
giving the public ample time to see what we're putting out there, and I'll keep it, I think what we should do is add it to the agenda, and then table or defer it to the next public meeting and address it at that time.
Yeah.
And that way you can solicit the input from the residents of Loch Lomond as well. This is really definitively less of a knee jerk and more of an opportunity to digest the issue.
Yeah, and
Mr.
just
Chair-
to get all their feedback.
Procedurally, though, you do need to waive it, add it, and then you can go ahead. and
Correct,
table
yeah, I
it.
just wanted to see where we were at it, so I think we're all comfortable with it.
All right.
Through
so-
the
It
chair.
would be,
Councilman Garcia.
Sorry.
it would be to September 26th is the date of the second budget hearing, just as a point of information.
Great, thank you, Town Manager.
Through the
Garcia.
chair to the town attorney, the gentleman from SFM is here. Is there any way to be able to ask him some questions.
The item will be on the agenda for public comments, so
Yeah,
we will
well,
be able.
that's what I'm trying to suggest, that we go over some of the key points with him while he's
Ye-
here, and
yes.
then, that we can get as much information out now, so they can make some preliminary decisions back in Loch Lomond, and then we can also get some initial information.
But the final decision won't be made at this meeting.
Yes.
Through the chair to the deputy town attorney.
You're recognized, yes.
Thank you. Is the draft resolution, has it been drafted? Is it available?
It's before you. You should have a copy
I don't.
on your...
It's not in my package.
No, it just got distributed. It's a handout.
I don't think I got it.
This here.
Now, again,
have these. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, so I'd go ahead and move to waive the rules to go ahead and add a discussion item, solely for discussion, on the contract change related to the Loch Lomond Neighborhood Service District.
I'll second.
So there's a motion to add item 7C to the agenda, which is the contract for the Loch Lomond Neighborhood Service District. There's also a motion to waive the rule on that item, and there's a motion, there's a second for both of those. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 7C added to the agenda. Any other order of business deferrals, additions, or deletions to the agenda? Is there a motion to pass the agenda?
I'll move to, well, going in order, I'll go ahead and move item 7A.
Well, we still haven't had public
Did I skip
comments.
over
Yes.
something?
Oh, right.
We're still on order of business.
Okay, I'll move to adopt the agenda as amended.
There's a motion for the agenda to be adopted as amended.
Point of order. I have item 6A, approval of minutes before. Or no. No.
And yes.
No. I'm sorry. I'm looking at three different things at the same time.
Okay, motion on the table to adopt the agenda with item 7C on it. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All's in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. On to public comments.
Good evening. Well, comments or questions from the attending public shall be directed to the mayor in a courteous tone, and to ensure the orderly conduct and efficiency of this meeting, public comments shall be limited to 3 minutes, maximum per person. Welcome. State your name and address for the record.
I have two questions. What did you decide with the Loch Lomond issue first?
Nothing.
You're going
Oh,
to
we're
discuss
going
it?
to discuss it. We're deferring final action on it to the budget hearing, which is September 26th. So that's when the final decision will be made. We're just going to have discussion about it to get information out there and give residents of Loch Lomond time to debate it and give us feedback.
So what's in the budget for Loch Lomond Special Taxing District?
That would not
It
change under
stays?
any
It
circumstances.
doesn't go to $400,000?
It would, no. So even if it were to be approved today, it would not impact the assessment that was passed on Tuesday, because it would be covered by the contingency reserve. So for between fiscal year, that starts on October 1st and September 30th of next year, there would be no change even if there was a switch. So just want to be clear on that.
Okay. The other question is, I know that elderly people, when they get here, they get an extra minute on the clock. How do you become, when do you become elderly? Is there a
really not-
time?
Mika,
Is it
you're gonna
because I
live
have-
forever,
If I have
so-
white hair, I get elderly discounts?
It's really not a provision for age, it's ADA, but if you're requesting it, I'm kindly going to give you the extra minute that I give some individuals who have requested in private because of ADA conditions. It has nothing to do with age. But if you would like to, just let
So
me
I
know.
have to request it?
Just request it right now, like if you would like to, I would
Thank
give
you
you
very
that
much. I'm
additional
so
minute
trained on
always.
3 minutes that I don't think I can do 4. But that's
I give 4, do not
just in
worry.
case.
It's given to you.
So click it. Oh,
I did.
it went to 4. Thank you. Martha Mendez, 7,000 Glen Eagle Drive. I'm here on 2 issues. Of course, this one I'm not going to discuss because this has to be brought up to the HOA, because people talk and they don't understand what the repercussions of their sayings brings up. I have, in last Tuesday's meeting, you have legislative priorities. And you discussed, and I don't know if you discussed, because I was out by 10 o'clock, I did a Biden, I said I'm going to bed, and that was it. So there was no mention of blasting in the legislative priorities. I don't know if you discussed it. I don't know if it was an issue. It was added, added? Thank you. Okay, now the other thing is, of course, it was very hard to read the budget because I get it in ant print. This is what I got. It's unreadable. So I went to my computer and I put them the long way, only I ran out of toner. So now, so I couldn't find any reference to LPRs in Loch Ness, in Windmill Gates, in Lake Hilda, in Lake Martha. If the issue was security for the residents of this town, the town should have an item to protect the other communities, not just the ones you're forcing to carry the LPRs. This is an item that you're shoving down the throats of the special taxing districts. I can't call them the neighborhood whatever districts. To me, they're STDs, and there'll always be STDs. It's very hard, I'm glad I got an extra minute, for people my age to change their line of thinking. So those are the two things. I want LPRs all over town. I want the town to put money in this budget to put LPRs in the whole town, so that everybody in this town is protected, not the people in the STDs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mendez. Additional public comments? Ms. Lucis.
Wow, you guys got a full house. All right, Claudia Lucis, 8220 Menteith Terrace. Good evening. Would like to take a moment to thank and acknowledge Councilwoman Marilyn Arano for her exhaustive efforts on trying to protect the right to vote for those of us who live in Section 1. I also need to thank you, Councilman Luis Collazo, and Councilman Josh Dieguez, for honoring and trying to protect that vote, our right. Very troubling to see what occurred here on Tuesday night. Going back to the LPR issue that Mirta mentioned, it is being shoved down our throats. Traffic, what is it, safety enhancement measures? We live in the world of adjectives. At the end of the day, they're speed bumps. LPRs, okay, we should have the right to vote whether or not we want it. What is the fear behind not allowing those that live in Section 1 to vote for this? I'm at a loss. I'm trying to wrap my brain around it, and I can't. I remember not too long ago when the Optimus Park item was here, and we were told repeatedly by some on this council, those that campaigned for it, how important it was. The people said otherwise. Why? Because it was put up to a vote. 60-40, that's how it went. Why can't we do the same with Section 1? I just can't understand why we won't allow the people to vote. If they vote in favor of it, then that's it, end of story. But you're denying us that right. And in today's climate, that's concerning. That's political behavior that really concerns those of us that understand the Constitution, understand the Charter, and value the freedoms that we have. We don't take them lightly. Give us our right. You don't have the authority to make every single decision, especially, it is a special taxing district. It's an STD. It's a disease passed on to those who live in that area. It's a tax for us. Let us decide what we want. Maybe you're not the end-all, be-all. Clearly, you weren't for the Optimus Park. Give us that right. I cannot stress enough how upsetting it is to see what took place here. It is a violation at this point. It is insulting. We trust you guys. But by the same token, we expect you to honor our right to vote. I guess I can't claim ADA right now, right? I guess that ends
You're too young.
my statement.
You're too young.
Well, thank you. I'll take that one.
Thank you, Ms. Lucis. Any additional public comments? Any public comments online, Madam Clerk?
I don't see any participant online, but if you are at home and you want to participate, it is now the moment to just state your name and address for the record, and good evening. But no, I don't see anyone.
No public comments online. Public comments are now closed. On to the consent calendar. Is there a motion to adopt the consent calendar?
I'll move it.
It's a motion by Councilman Fernandez. I'll second it. Any discussion? All's in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Before we get into the ordinance in first reading, I do want to take a moment of personal privilege to recognize one of my fellow colleagues here on the dais, Councilman Raymond Garcia. At our last meeting on Tuesday, the mayor was celebrating his 40th birthday. Also want to recognize that he came out here during a very special, very momentous moment, right? You're celebrating your fourth decade out here, and he had to go home a little bit earlier than expected. Councilman Garcia, you were home sick. I'm not going to say that you were deathly ill, but you were noticeably sick when you sat next to me, to the point where I maybe scooted over a few inches. But I just want to recognize you. You came here when we needed you, because we would have lost quorum at that meeting, and I appreciate the fact that you came through. So thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you.
Yeah, you got it. On to ordinance in first reading.
An ordinance adopting the millage rate for fiscal year 2023-24. An ordinance of the Town of Miami Lakes, Florida, adopting the millage rate of the Town of Miami Lakes for the fiscal year commencing October 1st, 2023 through September 30th, 2024. Pursuant to Section 200.065 Florida statutes, providing for directions to tax collector, providing for notice, providing for conflicts, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
I'll move it.
So motion, there's a second.
Council member, I have to read a statement into the record on this item.
Yes, please.
Okay. Budget statement for the record, the proposed millage rate for the Town of Miami Lakes fiscal year 2023-24 is 2.0732. This rate is the rolled back rate. The rolled back rate is defined by truth and millage trim as the rate that generates the same tax revenue as the current year, less new construction, additions, deletions, and rehabilitative improvements. The gross taxable value for operating purposes is $4,515,345,099. The proposed millage rate will generate $8,893,153 in ad valorem revenue, budgeted at 95% collection rate.
Council, I also would like to advise that, yes, there is another ordinance that's going to come after this with regards to the budget. However, right now, you're not discussing the budget, and the budget is not appropriate to be discussed at this point. You're just discussing the millage. Millage needs to be passed, and then after that, you can pass through to the second ordinance.
Thank you, Deputy Town Attorney. Just on the millage, there's a motion, there's a second. Any discussion just on the millage?
Just on the millage?
Just on the millage.
I have 100%, I believe 100% that us as a body will be able to provide the services that we promised our residents. We lowered the millage rate. They needed the relief. However, we promised them other things, and hopefully we'll be able to do that for them with the millage that we're adopting today. And I have 100% confidence in my colleagues that are here, not here, that will be able to do that for them, and the staff.
Thank you, Councilman, for those remarks. Any additional discussion just on the millage? Just on the millage? Please call the roll, Madam Clerk.
Ordinance in first reading, item 7A. Councilmember Fernandez.
Yes.
Councilmember Garcia.
Yes.
Councilmember Diegues.
Yes.
Councilmember Collazo.
Yes.
Councilmember Ruano.
Yes.
The ordinance in first reading passes.
Thank you, council. On to the next item, 7B.
7B is an ordinance of the Town of Miami Lakes, Florida, approving and adopting the budget for the Town of Miami Lakes for fiscal year 2023-2024, providing for expenditure of funds, providing for amendments, providing for carryover of funds, providing for the incorporation of the adopted capital budget as a capital improvement element of the comprehensive plan, providing for conflicts, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
I'll move it.
Second.
There's a motion, there's a second. Discussion. We have someone coming to speak on the item. Go ahead.
I would open public comments. Make a motion.
On
Yes, you do.
the budget.
Hold on, Ms. Mendez, we would need a motion to...
I'll move to reopen public comments.
There's a motion to reopen. Second. All in favor? Aye. Go ahead, Ms. Mendez.
There's two people here. Wow.
I was advised by the attorney to follow proper protocol.
The protocol was that every item would be open for public comments. That's what was established. That you can come up at any moment during the discussion. I thank you, by the way. But this is from me to the town attorney.
We adopted new rules the last time, Ms. Mendez, so the new rules, that's how it has to be. Public comments are at the beginning, then if they wish to open them up for each of the items, they can do so. It's not an issue.
I don't know what he said.
Go ahead.
He said
you-
at the last meeting.
You can go ahead. We're in the proper posture. Go ahead.
Okay. I don't know, I was looking what I could read without a magnifying glass, and there's $50,000 for the K-9 parking lot. Can you get those 50,000 and put them in, on Glen Eagle Drive and fix my street, or Cow Pen, or Bull Run? They're horrid. The streets are horrid. I remember the town manager saying that he would prepare a sheet of paper that would take everything from all the other revenues that you get and what is going to be done for tree trimming and sidewalk repair and road repair. I don't see that paper. Did you get it by any chance? That was discussed at the workshop.
I don't know what paper you were talking about.
You said you were going to prepare a statement, because there's, in this thing, there's monies for sidewalk repair and tree trimming and from all different sources, not the ad valorem revenue.
I have not done that yet.
So how am I supposed to know how much the town is going to spend on tree trimming? It's all over creation. You know, give me paper, give me something I can read. I go over all the numbers. I like to know what's being done in this town. I like to make the people in this town aware of what's happening, and now I have to make my HOA aware of this thing, which is horrendous. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Mendez. All public comments are open. Any additional public comments on this item? Hearing none, public comments are closed. On to the item. I believe there was a motion and it was seconded. Any discussion?
We have a recap of, it's a shorter presentation that we are more than happy to go through. It's shorter than what was presented at the workshop. It's,
Is there any, I'm sorry, is there any new information in that presentation? that
no,
wasn't
there's no new information other than because of a couple things, like for instance, there were a couple things that just very subtly changed, like how much comes in from some of these other funds, just because we've gotten some changes. What were the changes, Melissa? If you can just run through, I know you.
If I think if we just take a pulse of the will of the council, if you can just highlight the changes, I think we can move forward on it and respect also the fact that you worked on it, and then that'll allow us to have the gentleman come up for some questions.
Yeah, there was, for instance, there was one grant that came in after the workshop. It's a $4,200 grant that we have to now reflect in here as a project in process. So it's both reflected on the revenue and the expense side. The contingency reserve that is required for the 2-month fund balance at the previous meeting was supposed to be $146,000. Now that got reduced by about $1,000 to $145,000. And the administrative support, the $26,000, that was a change for.
So the building department made some changes to their budget and adding some stuff to their technology fund and utilizing some of their technology fees. So that increased their administrative support, which comes into the general fund. So because of that, that is partly why the administrative support line from the other meeting that we had went from 17 to 26.
Right. And then at the end, what that also causes is that the amount that needs to be transferred, that we're recommending to be transferred from the MLOP master plan at the workshop was $366,000. Now that drops to $356,000. Those are the only changes from the workshop information.
Thank you for the condensed highlighted version. Is there any discussion by the council on any of the changes?
I have.
Yes, you're recognized. Go ahead.
Yes, and I'm not sure if this is, I guess this is the time. I would still ask my colleagues and ask the staff I have yet to see a budget that reflects the additional, 2 new officers to our budget.
Yep.
And, I would still like to see, and I would love to see if my colleagues would back me up here to see if we can, if not 2, maybe 1, but I still like to see additional officers on the streets here in the town of Miami Lakes, and I know I've spoken to staff, and I know it's not an easy process, especially since, we have to continue to pay for this. It's $160,000 per officer, I understand that.
Correct.
However, I think that along with, we've seen what additional overtime has done with the details. We've seen a rise in car thefts. I just think additional officers on the streets are still something that the residents are looking for, and I support. So I'd still like to see something. If we can do 2, maybe 1 this year. And
Yeah, I know that it was talked about at the workshop. Unfortunately, at the workshop, it's a forum where no votes were taken,
Sure,
right? So we
sure.
couldn't necessarily bring that just based on conversation, right? So, but we do have prepared, and it's pretty straightforward. Any officer that you add, $160,000 per, right? So if it's 2, that'd be $320,000. It would just be added to the police budget, and then that would create that much more of a deficit, and then we would be recommending that much more of a transfer from Miami Lakes Optimist Capital Fund. So instead of $356,000, it would be $670,000 that we would be recommending for a transfer from MLOP into the general fund to fund the 2 added police officers.
I'd like to see if there's can I make a motion here to add this to the second budget, or is that?
No, we're on the budget, so you can make any motion that you like.
I would make a motion to have the staff look into adding an additional officer, and seeing where we can get that, we can tighten our belt throughout all the line items to see if we can, MLOP, I know we don't like to cannibalize MLOP anymore, especially myself. I'm a proponent for parks. I just think that an extra additional officer right now is needed, and I'd be willing to make that a trade. So I make a motion to add that to the budget.
So there is a motion on the table to add, was it 1 or 2 officers?
I prefer 2, and I'd like to open up for discussion, what my colleagues feel about that.
The motion is to add 2 additional police officers onto the budget, and in that same vein, are you accepting the manager's recommendation to reduce the Optimist budget by the same amount? fund those officers?
Is that the only option, reducing? I know that there might be, is there anything in carry forward, nothing additional, but MLOP?
The changes that we made already, that we went over during the workshop, were the changes that we believed would lessen the impact to the services that we offer. So we made a lot of changes to the budget. We got, I think the starting point was almost 900,000 after the rollback rate was established. And from there, we did a lot of, we relooked at some of the revenue estimates from the state, so we added that to the revenue side. On a handful of things, we looked at, ultimately, we started with, after that, the revenue side, we started with $710,000 deficit.
Mm-hmm.
And then we made the changes to the expense side that we believed were tolerable, I guess, for lack of a better term, where the level of service would, it's going to be changed, right? The level of service, there's no way you can get, almost $1 million worth of budget shortfall and have it not affect the way we deliver service. But we thought that the recommendations that we're making are the items that lessen that and would least be felt by the residents out in the street.
No, understandable.
So
You've done
if we don't take it from MLOP to get to another $320,000, we would have to start looking at shutting down some of our operations, laying off people. Unfortunately, in the budget world, 2 and 2 is 4, and there's no way you can, there's no magic place to find this. So we tried to soften the blow on the service delivery side.
Yep.
And that's why we ended up at the end. If we could have, we would not have even recommended a transfer from the capital fund. But we got to that point where we said any more than this would be noticeable, dramatically noticeable, the impact to the service delivery that we provide our residents.
And I want to thank you for that. I'm sorry, through the chair.
No, you're fine.
And I want to thank you for your staff. I know you've bended backwards to try to find the money. As a body, we all decided here to roll back the rate. And I know that also keeping in mind, what the residents have asked for us to prioritize. And it's not easy. If it was easy, anybody would do it, right? So I'm asking my colleagues to, let's put our heads together here and see if we can, what we can do to get those 2 officers on the streets of Town of Miami Lakes. And I'll be willing to hear what you have to say, and if we have to, if it's just one, it's one, but I think we do have to add additional officers. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Fernandez.
Mr. Manager, so I remember during our meeting, so that even though the proposed budget now is taking $362,000 from the MLOP.
Yeah, 356.
Right. There's also park impact fees that were collected that offset that amount, correct?
There are revenues, new park impact fees that are going into MLOP. So I think that if you could, what was the starting point for MLOP? We took away 356 and new impact fees were going in. What's the net effect of all that, Melissa, please?
Because if memory serves me, I think the net effect was either 105 or 150, which might be close to 1 officer. And if we leave that fund flat and are able to fund the officer, that's something I would have the appetite to do.
And if you allow me, while Melissa's looking for the numbers, we have that motion from Councilmember Garcia, but we need a second.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
So the current MLOP master plan budget is $1,485,000. Of that, 490 is coming in from impact fees. So it's already included in that budget. And it's also taking into account taking away the 356,000. So is that answering the question?
New impact fees coming in, total how much?
So the impact fees that have been collected in this current year is 490,910. And part of this budget, it's being transferred out of the impact fees into the capital fund, specifically to the MLOP master plan.
So there's actually, at the end, even if this transfer from MLOP happens, there's a net positive experience of plus 140.
So the total budget is 1.4.
I know.
Okay.
You said 1.485.
095, yes.
Right, but just looking at, micro-looking it, there's impact fees coming into that?
Correct.
That contributes to that 1.485, right?
Correct.
So that impact fees coming in is 490
Yes.
or 490-something?
490,
490?
910.
And if we're recommending 356 to come out, we're talking about 134,000? Net, it increases 134,000 if my,
Yes, 134,687.
And if one officer is roughly 160,000, I think that gets us within, now we're, we have to
yeah, you're
find
talking about
25.
26,000.
Let me see if I can help with math a little bit. If the officer comes on, there'll be some reduction in overtime, I'm assuming, right? Because you'll have an additional personnel or additional body, so that might take it over the hump. But I hate doing this type of math. It really puts us in a very bad posture if it's in getting into like fuzzy numbers. I think you drove the issue home, right? You'd like to see what that looks like. You'd like to see how we can get there. I think we're providing some guidance on where we're kind of trying to go with this. Maybe it's something that can come back in the second budget hearing. I mean, we're trying to make two things happen, right? Which is get the extra officer in there and at the same time keep the Optimist budget whole. I think I see those two things being discussed here. So there might be a factor that we're not considering now, which is how much police overtime would kind of be absorbed by that officer where we're not paying overtime rates, right? And that depends a lot on where you're going to put them. You're going to put them in midnights, you're going to put them on the afternoon shift, so.
That would be up to, of course, the major where he wants,
Right.
what makes
Well, if
more
it was
sense.
up to the major says he doesn't need another officer. So he would actually leave it how it is. But we're the policymakers and we're making some decisions and we're going down that path. So I say give them some opportunities to come back and see where that kind of shakes out for the second budget hearing, rather than trying to dissect this on the fly.
I think it would still require for you to make an amendment. I mean, because the only way we can bring back, I can't necessarily bring it back without getting, action by the council.
Well, I mean, as I understand what he had been asking you at the workshop, and sort of what he's asking now, is not even that you make an amendment to the budget and present that, so much as, show him if you were to recommend to
What?
add an officer or to where would you pull the money to make that happen? And just, and again, at that juncture, I'm assuming at the second budget hearing, he will make an amendment at that time to adopt what you're saying. I don't know that you necessarily need
No, I understand.
change the whole
I understand,
workshop, no.
but I think I answered that question. The place we would draw it from would be from Miami Lakes Optimist Capital Fund. That's the only place left, as far as, from administration's standpoint.
So then I guess the question becomes if you're going to be making a motion now to go ahead and actually adopt that proposed change, or if you want to take more time to flesh out whether or not you're going to have an alternative.
Well,
solution.
of course, I'd like to have, I've spoken to Melissa and I've spoken to our manager about it. If he wants to be able to present it in the budget the way it would look, exactly the way it would look. I mean, he's explained it to us where it would come from. I wouldn't be opposed to the second budget meeting to make that final decision. For the rest of my colleagues to be more informed on how that would look like, that's fine with me, as long as it's being considered and it's considered on the budget and what it would look like, the actual numbers, so the residents could also take a look at it and we can make that final decision the second budget hearing. That's fine with me.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're making the final decision in the second budget hearing
Anyway.
regardless.
Yeah. So-
I don't want to get into a situation where we get into the second budget hearing and we get a response like what we just got, which is I didn't have sufficient direction to change that on the budget and whatnot. So
Well,
I would rather memorialize it now and give him that direction now, and then give him the time.
And that's why I'm looking for a motion and,
Right.
to amend the
And
budget to
then
that
I
effect.
will put a motion to add it to the actual budget, adding an additional police officer, where those funds would come from, and an explanation on where it would come from, and also, future, how we pay for it in the future. Because again,
Right.
adding another officer, and I'm fully aware that adding another officer means we have to pay for that officer going forward.
Right.
Understandable. And again, no surprises here, just an open forum, open explanation to myself, my colleagues, and the residents, and if it's decided that it cannot be done, well, it cannot be done.
Right, and I think that direction then gives the manager the ability to do his due diligence and his legwork and study any other implications that change may have. So I'm gonna go ahead and second that motion.
There's a motion, there's a second.
I have discussion.
Go ahead, Councilman Dieguez, you're recognized.
Thank you. And for this part, I would ask the major to please come to the mic. Thank you, Major. And again, there's been a lot of discussion about adding police officers to the force for a while, right? And different members of the council at different points have used different points of information for that. But notwithstanding, at the end of the day, obviously, you're the professional that we rely on to give us your unbiased and truthful opinion as to what you actually need. And your predecessor previously had recommended that he did not need, or not recommended, he stated that he did not need additional officers at this time, that the data did not reflect that was required, and also that there was additional flexibility that comes with utilizing overtime funds, as opposed to hiring additional officers. Now, I have a series of questions, but my first one would be, has your opinion changed compared to the last opinion that the prior major provided this council?
Right, so I was here for the data study that we did for the necessity of, meeting the criteria for handling calls and providing service. At that time, it didn't warrant, and I still believe it doesn't today, only because we've opened up a new standard where there's minimum staffing now, which we didn't have before. So now, with the minimum staffing, we could provide that service at best quality. So, and that does entail overtime. So it offsets. It also allows us to put the officers where we need them, when we need them. So I'll give you an example. If we get one officer, we put him on midnights, but what happens if we have a deficiency on the weekends, during the day and during the afternoon? So we still need money to cover that in overtime. So I think strategically the overtime minimum mandatory manpower is really what's the issue here. Not the extra officers, but maintaining a minimum amount of officers to provide the service that's needed.
So as I understand it, at least for the next year, within the current fiscal year that we're discussing, you think that the additional officer is not necessary right now, that you can do it with through other means?
We can maintain the accurate safety and service to the town with the minimum staffing that's needed that we put in place.
Okay, but excellent. So, but now let's go with a hypothetical into a situation, because again, at one point or another, I think we all would rather see uniformed officers and see more of them where possible, but obviously it's not always feasible, right? Especially in a tight budget year like today. So my question would be, if you were to get the additional officer or two, how would you deploy them?
Again,
And
I put them where we would.
spot, so I'm not expecting you to.
Yeah, they would have to go into a squad. We have three uniform squads, which is days, afternoons, and midnights. During the day, during the week, we have redundancy because we have our neighborhood resource unit detectives. In the afternoon, we have a couple of extra of the traffic officers that are not part of the patrol, but if they're short, they supplement them and they augment them. Midnights is where and weekends is where we don't have that, right? We don't have our neighborhood resource officers working the weekends, and we don't have the traffic officers. So that's where we're most vulnerable, when we go under manpower and on midnights. So if we add them on midnights, because we don't have backup, that would be ideal, because we don't have augmentation forces during that time, and maybe an officer on the daytime, but it really wouldn't work that much. We don't need them because he would just augment more during the week, but we would need more officers during the weekend, and we can't just adjust that officer to be just working Saturday and Sunday. So I think, falling back on the overtime thing, on a good night, we're looking at, 7 officers and a sergeant. That's about 8 when nobody's off. And if we do have any critical incident where somebody's off for COVID or paternity leave or another emergency, and people with regular days off, we won't fall below the 5 anymore with the sergeant.
So, okay, so just to make sure I understood that, I'm going to, regurgitate my understanding. So with the additional officer, they would be available to kind of supplement wherever the gaps are, which would probably be weekends and nights, but,
He would only fall into one squad.
Yeah, he'd only be on midnight.
Yeah, he wouldn't be like a...
He would be assigned to one of
he
the
would be
3
to
days,
one squad.
afternoons, or midnights. Most likely, I'm understanding probably midnights.
Right, midnights.
Because
Because we don't have
That doesn't
redundancy.
have the redundancy with the traffic units or the NRUs.
And would you be able to plug that gap with overtime funds, or?
Yes.
Okay.
We have that in this budget. We put in an extra 40,000 in overtime money to accomplish the minimum staffing, so we never have less than 5 bodies, which would be 4 officers plus a supervisor
Correct.
at any one time.
Correct.
Okay.
May I ask a question quickly while we're on this topic?
Councilwoman Rano, I think we've all had an opportunity to go, so after Councilman Dieguez is finished, I'll go Councilwoman Rano, and then I'll go to Councilman Fernandez.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Okay, yeah, so I guess I'll wrap up I'll wrap up my line of questioning. I think you answered the 2 things, which was, I wanted to know, what your recommendation was as far as, do you need, right, which is a different question from do you want? And then, would you be able to still accomplish your minimum staffing goals for the midnight shift in particular, with overtime funds, which you also addressed?
Yes, sir.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank
So
you.
then, moving to some discussion from myself, I've wrapped up my line of questioning. My hesitancy, especially if we're talking about the Optimus Park services. Oh, that's right. Yeah. So just to address my hesitancy here, and now this is the 5th year that I've been at this in the budget process. The MLOP fund is always everybody's piñata to beat up, and what I've become, and it's become a custom now at this point, and to me at least a running joke, because whether it was that we pulled from it back in 2019 when we had that lag in the franchise fee. We never put back the money to go there. Here, I understand it's a little different, but we're replacing it with the one-time funding source that we can use to redo all our pocket parks. In fact, the amount basically covers the mini parks capital improvement program that I want to, complete finally, right? So, again, these are one-time sources that we're beating up to at any rate, right? We're going to add a cop, and we're going to pay for it from this fund. On a recurring basis, though, we're using one-time sources, which I have a major problem with. And then on top of that, again, to me, that we keep going to the MLOP fund. And I understand, too, whether it's the impact fees or whether it's the carry-forward money, right, that we're going to use to pay it back. It just again, I don't like it. I think it creates a major problem, and it's gotten to the point, like I said, it's become an internal joke for me, because it just demonstrates almost an unseriousness, and I don't mean that at anybody. I just want to be clear, because this is just what I've seen year after year, and it's just starting to grind my gears a bit, where we just treat it as like the break glass in case of emergency, and it just shows that we're not really making steady progress toward actually saving to make improvements to the park. So those are just my reservations with that, and I just wanted to put them on the record for the public, whoever may be watching or whoever may watch this in the future. But at any rate, with that, I yield.
Thank you for yielding, Councilman Dieguez. Councilwoman, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Councilmember. I had a question based on the discussion that we're having about adding additional police officers. It's always been my understanding that overhead dollars go a bit further than actually hiring a new officer. So if we were to consider, and I agree wholeheartedly with Councilmember Dieguez's position on not utilizing funds from the Optimus Park, because it does kind of diminish the seriousness of the fact that we want to accomplish a project at that park at some point. Maybe not the project that was on the ballot, but something. If we were to allocate funds towards public safety, would it not be more efficient to allocate more dollars towards overtime instead of another officer. And perhaps it wouldn't have to be $150,000. It could be similar to what we did last year, where we could raise the current 40,000 to perhaps 100,000 and utilize those monies in a more productive and efficient way. I wanted to direct that question to the major to see if that was something that would benefit us.
Yes, anything that could supplement my overtime to either provide needed situational details, traffic enforcement, burglary, where I could have more officers with higher visibility in the streets. And again, to help me with the minimum staffing, I could always add another officer on a Saturday night on overtime to supplement the workforce as on a part-time basis, because I can't do that full-time. I could only do that part-time as hiring through the overtime. So I could do that hiring overtime. I could add them as I need them during shifts where we might be experiencing a spike in crime or a shortage on manpower.
Perfect. And then that would manage the recurring cost problem, where we would be utilizing these one-time monies for something that would be a recurring cost if we were to bring in a new officer. So I would be more in favor of entertaining overtime dollars and not so much a new position. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Fernandez, you recognized.
So my question is kind of along the same lines. So I wanted you to walk us through, and if you don't have the numbers in front of you and you want to bring it back for the next budget hearing, I completely understand. But I wanted to compare exactly, dollar for dollar with that same $160,000, one uniformed officer versus expending that in overtime. What gives us the most amount of police hours?
Well, obviously, overtime, if you gave me $1 million in overtime, I could put a lot more officers when I need them in different locations. Even in one shift, I could overload it. I could put 20 officers to work.
Right, no. So I understand the part where it gives you more flexibility, right? But I kind of want to get an idea. Obviously, I mean, I'm sure one uniform officer gives you, 2,000 hours a year of police patrol coverage, right? How much does that buy us with overtime dollars?
Well, equally so. If it's one officer, it's just being used on one shift. With $160,000 in overtime, I could use different officers during different shifts. Sometimes I could put 2 officers on a shift instead of just one. I could put 3 officers. I have flexibility.
Let me ask it a different way.
Okay.
How many hours of overtime can I buy for $160,000?
It
I'd have to do the
depends.
math. Yeah,
Because
they're all different rates.
Different hourly rates, right? Because you have a senior guy who's got a higher hourly rate, a junior guy who's got a lower hourly rate. Remember, overtime obviously is that time and a half.
If you put it like an average of 75, I would say about $75 an hour. So divide 160 by 75.
It's the same thing, more or less.
Yeah. Now I could use it strategically.
It's targeted, very targeted to what your needs are, as opposed to have, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm used to, from my old days, staffing in a different public safety sector, but like a Tuesday night is not the same as a Saturday night, right?
Right.
So the demand
Correct.
for calls is not the same, where if you have somebody who's just, somebody you put on midnights, let's say you work them Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that's fine, but, then 2 nights out of the week he's not there, minus the days that he takes off. The overtime can be very targeted to whether.
It gives me the
it's a
flexibility to
special-
target,
yeah.
instead of being one or 2 persons that's just going to be on a steady shift with the same days off. I could augment as needed. Instead of one officer a midnight, I could hire 3 guys on midnights on a Friday night, a Saturday night if we're having problems, and still equal it out at the end. I might not need them the next week. So, but I that's what we were doing now. We were enhancing the burglary details by adding additional uniform officers as needed to address issues.
Through the chair.
We've-
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, let me just ask. Yep.
It seems like this issue has a lot of debate and discussion, so to be fair, we'll go right back through the roll and give Councilman Morano as well a second
I have
opportunity.
one follow-up question for the major. Okay, so understanding the dynamics of that and the fact that it's cost neutral, are you, when you have these additional overtime details and, supposing you get more funding for more overtime details, are you able to staff all of those details? Do you have sufficient staffing within the pool of officers where all those overtime details always get staffed?
If we have enough money for it.
Right,
Funds,
exactly.
yeah.
But if you say we're going to have a new detail at this and this time, you have a line
Always.
of officers.
You never have an empty seat. If you're hiring a detail with 5 officers, let's say, you never only get 4 volunteers, and you never end up with a...
No, we
seat
always
everyone-
have full staff when we
So
staff the detail.
our base pool is large enough to be able to accommodate any additional overtime
Yes,
that we put out.
absolutely.
Okay, that's my last question for him to the manager. The park impact fees that are being moved into MLOP, are those large park impact fees, or those?
Those are park improvement fees. Yeah, they're going into, that's the only ones that can go into MLOP since it's an existing park. So open space impact fees couldn't go to MLOP unless we bought the lot next door and we're going to expand it or what have you.
So to Councilman Dieguez's point, and I'm just curious, would those funds be able to be used for the other project that he mentioned?
Not the park impact fees. Yeah, I guess it would be, right? The park impact fees? Yeah, the park improvement fees that's going now into MLOP, that could be diverted to the pocket parks for the, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Back to Councilman Garcia.
So Major, thank you for, of course, you're the final word, right? With your opinion on what you need. A couple questions though. Nights and weekends, we've seen what's happening with the NSDs and the security. We have SFM here, and we're asking SFM, hey, we need you to train your officers to, if they see something, call the police, right? So I'm foreseeing them, if they follow what we're asking, and I'm sure they will, because they also have other contracts with the town, to make sure that the calls to the police are going to come, more calls are going to come, because they're going to actually see somebody that doesn't belong there, they're going to make calls. And nights and weekends are the issues, right? I've always said that the overtime budget is actually, I think it's helping you right now, but we need some additional overtime. I'm sure you have a number in your head that says, okay, probably $40,000, $50,000 more would be enough for you. So and also the additional construction that's going on in the town. In the next year or two, we're going to have, apartments over in Commerce Way. We're going to have the apartments built on 154th in Shula's. There's going to be more. So my question to you is, if the overtime budget remains the same, and we still are able to add another officer to you at nights and weekends, is it something that's just going to make it more difficult for you to do your job? Is it, with the overtime still there, right, to give you the flexibility, but also that additional nights and weekend officer that's definitely needed? I mean, I know you say right now you don't need it,
Right.
but I'm thinking, remember, decisions we make now it's going to affect you 2, 3, 5, 10 years from now. Setting that precedent, right, of staffing. I ask you what your opinion on that is, based on what I just said.
I would have to, I know we're thinking forward, and I think that realistically and being, financially responsible and being, responsible to the town residents, with the study we just did right now, we are getting to our calls on time. We're not holding calls over, so it's hard to justify it, honestly. We did the study, we looked at the times. Our officers are under required times to arrive on emergency calls and on routine calls. Our calls don't hold at all, almost, except one maybe a month, and that's due to unforeseen circumstances, like a call, emergency call, where we had something like a bad accident or something. But I know there's future growth coming. I know all the projects that are coming, and then we could probably reanalyze that, or if I identify a deficiency in response times or calls holding over, extensive period of times, then I can make that decision if I start, looking at that and that becomes an issue. But right now, it's not an issue, so it's hard to just to say that it's a necessity.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. What I would add is there is going to be, well, there is an issue happening around the golf course right now, right?
Yeah.
And I know you were going.
It's not an issue.
Oh,
It
okay.
just, we had a burglary at one of the residents.
Yes.
And that's just one we haven't had, in the month of July, we didn't have any burglaries in the town of Miami Lakes, which is really good. In the month of August, we only had one. And the month now, September, was the one we had in Loch Lomond. So we really don't have a big burglary problem during the nighttime. With the overtime funds that we had gotten from this last fiscal year for the burglary and high visibility, we reduced vehicle burglaries by 23% in July, and I know I didn't give the report on Tuesday, and 47% in August reduction. This month, we've only had one vehicle burglary, and we're halfway through the month. So the enhancement of officers does work. Yes, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that.
Councilmember Garcia, obviously, right, because
Mr. Manager, recognized.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Currently, we have a little over 30,000 residents, right? Obviously, as that changes, right, as new developments, like you say, the golf course, the senior village, the South Point that's now coming on, as things change, right? The police department, the local, right, our local folks, in conjunction with the department, right? The department has resources that are really hard to match in other police departments. A small-town police department couldn't afford the resources that they have access to, especially in that data collection and data analysis. They are analyzing this data on a monthly basis, all right? They continue to see it. It's not something that they just look at every 6 months or once a year. They look at it on a monthly basis. And as the volume of people continues to increase, eventually the data is going to reflect a demand, right? And then from the supply side, what ultimately will probably be required is the minimum that they have now, the 4+1, 5 bodies on no matter what minimum. Ultimately, what will probably be required will be 6 total bodies, right? Now, to fill 6 total bodies on every shift at any given time, and that's the minimum no matter what, that will probably require to have an extra patrol unit, an extra officer on patrol at all times, 5 officers and 1 supervisor. Ultimately, that may require probably 4 officers, right? No, but between days off and you know, and so forth, and that coordination, and they do a great job coordinating days off to make sure that, you know, but there's unexpected things when people call in sick, or they have court, or they have training, or they have a lot of different things. So at some point, when the numbers reflect it, trust me, he will be the first guy in line coming and yelling and screaming and saying, we need another body minimum staffing.
And through the chair, what I want, and I'm glad you brought that up. What I want to bring up is being proactive. That's going to happen. We all know it's going to happen. When he says, hey, this is happening, and we have to start from go, if we start now anticipating something that we know is going to happen, actually being ahead of the game, it'll, to me, says that we're thinking proactively, we're thinking ahead of time. It's something that we know is going to happen, and we don't have to wait till last minute to say, oh, wait, this is happening. Well, we need to ramp up quickly. And then where are we going to come up with 4 officers out of nowhere? If we do it incrementally, eventually, when the need comes, we'll be at the staffing level, service levels necessary. And that is my main point. Not that you don't need it now, sir, and not that I, of course, 100% respect your 30 years experience risking your life every day. Absolutely. What I'm trying to do is actually be ahead of the game and provide you with what you need instead of scrambling at the last minute. Where are we going to come up with 4 officers or 3 officers or 2 officers? And that's the kind of thinking that I know my colleagues have all said they want to bring to being a council person here, is anticipating the needs of the residents and making decisions a little bit ahead of time so we don't have to scramble. That is the main reason I've been pushing this so hard for the last year, because I know it's coming, and wow, imagine being ahead of the game. And I having to scramble last minute to come up with the 2 or 3 or 4 officers to cover that. That's all I'm saying. I know it's a difficult year because of the rollback, and I totally understand that. However, it's a good exercise for us because it'll get us in the mindset of, okay, we know this is going forward. Where are we gonna, let's make decisions based on what's gonna happen in the next 5, 10 years. So I'll leave it with that, and I'll allow my colleagues to make their decision.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead because I haven't gotten.
No, absolutely. But I just
Well, the
wanna-
majors
just
there.
wanna, yeah.
No, that's okay. And I'll go down the row, like I said, and then we'll kick it back to the councilwoman who is also online. I wish I was standing at where you're standing right now, right? People tripping over themselves to give you what you need, right? Rarely in government do you see that. Usually you have to pound and stomp, and so you have a council that is 100% laser focused on public safety. And I know Councilman Garcia said that, you know, this is something that he's been pushing for a long time. And I think all of us here want to make sure that our residents are the safest possible. So I think that kind of lays the table. So you've been very clear. You know, you need flexibility. You don't need one person in a dedicated position. I appreciate where you're coming from, the position of looking forward rather than being in crisis management. And I think way too often in government, we're in crisis management mode. So that flexibility and that long-term solution, I think, is what we're trying to get to. I probably sit exactly where Councilwoman Morano's comments were. You know, we're dipping into a piggy bank that if we keep on dipping to, it's not going to be there, right? So putting in a full-time obligation is really going to force us to maybe move that needle on the budget and maybe on that millage rate in the future. But with that being said, heard you loud and clear, pound for pound, you need flexibility. In your department, and this was something that I started having conversations with Manager Peterman, I am not familiar with your chain of command structure or how you plug and play individuals. Is one person married to a squad? And
Yes.
Okay, then that makes it very clear to me, because in my line of business, I have flex employees, so I can put them and I can plug them in different areas. You do not have that luxury.
No, so with us, it's, they bid quarterly for a position, and it's based on seniority, the way it's given to them. So, and that's hours, shifts, and days off. Once they get that shift, they're married to that shift for that quarter. And then they could rebid, and according to whoever the seniority shifts, then they could change shifts, but they're married to that squad. Their squads have fixed days off and fixed hours.
And there's no, and again, it's the same question, you're gonna give me the same answer. There's no splitting of that baby. So you can't put somebody midnights, Saturday and Sunday, and then put them Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday afternoons.
No, that's something that you could do, but you would have to create a new squad just to facilitate that. You would have to add a whole bunch of officers, like a relief squad, as we call it, that relieves when it's needed. And they have, like, we have a relief sergeant, so he covers when the sergeants are off, and he has a flexible squad. That's his shift. His shift is Friday, Sunday, Monday, he covers the midnight shift. Tuesday, Wednesday, the afternoon shift, the sergeant is off, he covers the afternoon shift. Thursdays, which is his 5th day, he covers the day shift because the day sergeant is off. And that's what we call a relief sergeant, and we have relief squads. He doesn't have any officers because we don't have the officers to staff it. It's more important to have a sergeant with coverage to cover the other sergeants when they're off. So we have that position covered by a sergeant. In the department, with the staffing, they have a relief squad. They would do that. The whole sergeant and 7 officers, 8 officers.
Okay, so that's an interesting concept that I don't think we've tussled with, and I don't think we're going to get into, but, you know, could you create a position that has that, you know, that split shift, so to speak, and that's maybe one of the ways that you do that stopgap when you start identifying where the service needs as the population grows. And I think really what I'm hearing from you loud and clear is I need flexibility for the here and now, but I think that's something that you can do a deeper dive in with the major, which is seeing how you can best utilize that full-time resource officer, or full-time, with maybe creating a flex type of position where you can plug them, you know, I know my Friday, Saturday, Sundays, I need this, and then I'll augment my Monday, Tuesdays day shifts with that. That's just something that I had thought about with the town manager. I just didn't know how that played out in your department. I'm kind of siding with you in the sense that right now I feel if we're going to add additional resources, I want to make sure that they're flexible to meet your needs. I'm gonna go down the row and then have it come back. Councilman Fernandez, Councilman Dieguez.
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to add in response to my colleague, Councilman Garcia, is I appreciate the sentiment of let's not be, penny wise but pound foolish. But I don't see that being the situation here, and I understand and I appreciate being proactive, and I agree that we would need to be proactive. But those projects also, when the need arises, will be generating recurring revenue as well into our budget that we will use eventually to pay for those additional officers. They also generate impact fees, which includes the police impact fees that help to get our LPR net. So that is why I'm comfortable with, again, and why I was focusing my question on what you need right now, because at some point, yes, we need to have more officers to accommodate additional service calls, everything else, but that time is not right now, and there are other things we can do with that money, and we're not really solving anything, again, right now, and ultimately, with, again, those officers, through the recurring revenues from the new projects, will be covered. So, through the property taxes, et cetera, franchise fees that are going to be generating, et cetera. So that's the way that I look at it. And, but I appreciate the sentiment, but that's why, as I stated earlier, that's why I believe that right now I think we're at an adequate level for the time being.
Thank you, Councilman Dieguez. Councilwoman Morano.
Thank you, council member. I was thinking along the lines of what Councilmember Dieguez just said. Right now, we're looking at a snapshot for the next 12 months. Looking forward, when we do have that increase in population, we will also have increased revenues from all of these projects that are coming online. And so we can marry those together and we will be able to fund additional positions. What's a little difficult now is to, estimate what we'll need in the future and implement it today because those tax dollars haven't arrived yet. So I think that I would rather follow the recommendations of the major and follow what the information that we received from the study that says that we're not there quite yet. It's not to say that we will not address these issues in the future, and hopefully, future council members will also keep their eye on the ball with regards to public safety, because that is our first and foremost our biggest priority.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Garcia, you can close on the item.
Thank you so much. Just a quick question to the manager. When do we expect to see the first impact fees from the apartments being built on Commerce? And the next impact fees from 24, 25?
From that I'd have to get that from our
25,
planner,
26?
who is the one. The way the impact fees are paid is they actually get paid to the county, and then the county gets them, and then I think it's quarterly. They distribute the money. So usually not until the impact fees are paid when they ask for a building permit, right? Right. So the impact fees for South Point over there on Commerce are probably already in the hopper somewhere. They're probably either with the county and they're to be distributed, or they will be at some point. But
Do we have an estimation on what we're looking at?
do you know how much coming from that? It's hard.
Something that big.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not looking for specific. I mean, you can be off by 10, 15, 20%. That's fine. But do a project that big?
Danny?
What are we anticipating?
Danny, the Baptist Hospital, have they applied for a building permit yet? Okay, so they pay fees when it gets issued, right? And then what about the senior center? Nothing yet. And the golf course? Nothing yet. Okay, so those are projects that are, the only one that they would have already paid impact fees would be that South Point. But how much it is, I don't know, but I can get that for you.
Can I get in the 100,000s, in the $500,000 mark? Do we have any? I mean, it's a huge.
Kay, do you
all of them together are huge
Yeah.
projects.
No. Okay, when they distribute
In your
the impact fees
expert
to us,
opinion.
they tie it to where it's coming from, a project, right?
I will not hold you to it. I just need to.
Give Kay 2 minutes, she's checking, she's.
Thank you.
the
I'm sorry,
finance
Kay, I
side.
just-
That's more of a finance side, because they receive the revenue.
Just food for thoughts, just to know what's coming in, when it's coming in. Ballpark, nothing. And I'll just continue, as far as flexibility, to address that, I think the overtime budget should not be lowered, should continue to, in fact, if we have to add additional overtime to take it more flexible, to meet your goals, I'm all for that as well. So to me, it's not one or the other. It's continue with the overtime, add additional overtime as your needs arise, and then, of course, the additional officer would be to be ahead of the game, knowing that these impact fees are coming and not having to wait a year or scramble at the end. I think it's already coming. We know it's coming. The iceberg is there. We're about to hit it. Do we make the turn now, or do we wait, right? I'll just say it one more time, guys. I think now's the time to get ahead of the game. Something that I'm sure in hindsight, a couple years from now, we may look back and say, man, maybe we should have started it early. So those are my 2 cents, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we going to wait a little bit longer for that item?
We can get that information in a minute, but we'll just need a couple minutes.
I think we're done with discussion.
Sure.
I don't know if do you need that item to deliberate any further?
Well, just for my colleagues to be able to make a more informed decision of,
Sure.
what we expect in the next couple.
While we wait for that information, Madam Clerk, can you repeat the motion that was seconded?
Yes, the motion by Councilmember Garcia, which was seconded by Councilmember Fernandez, to add 2 police officers into the budget, and if 2 cannot, but at least 1. And then you stated that you would like the town manager and staff to provide you some feedback of where would this come from in the budget.
Yeah, provide to everybody.
Right.
Just to
That's
add
the
it to the
discussion
budget
that
numbers.
you just
Yeah,
had,
yeah,
but that's the
exactly.
motion on the table.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so the motion is to add 1 or 2, and then find out where it's coming from, and waiting on that last piece of information.
Councilmember Garcia, just as an aside related to this, is the concern of once the data starts to show that the demand is increasing and we need to open up the spigot and hire more officers, the beauty of having the relationship with Miami-Dade Police Department is different than if we had our own police department, where if we had to go out, hire officers, get them trained, get them, they go on this FTO program where they field training officers, they ride with an officer, so they don't really count as a body. Probably for the first year, we don't have to suffer through that because we have a pool of already experienced, trained officers of probably 3,000 officers. We just pluck them in 30 days, they're there ready to go. So that's the beauty of having the relationship that way.
And that's a great relationship, and I'm just
Yeah.
anticipating, like I said before, and I know that the committee, the advisory board also asked us to spend some money on a study to see if having our own police department might be more advantageous than not. We don't know what the results of the study is going to be, and there are a lot of balls in the air that we don't know yet. So, guys, I totally get it. I put you on the spot. I know it's last minute. Just we can't anticipate in the next year, 2, 3 years, 3 projects coming online. It's gonna bring, would say, what, a couple $100,000 in impact fees, maybe?
Well, it's not only that, because the impact fees are one-time shots.
Yeah,
right?
one-time
But
shot.
more important than that is the ad valorem tax that it will bring, because the ad valorem
Okay.
is a perpetual revenue stream.
So I'm just speculating we're gonna have enough for at least 1 officer with these 3 projects, with the ad valorem and the impact fees, at least part of that. So just food for thought for my colleagues, and I will leave it at that, and I thank you for your time, and of course, Major, thank you so much.
Mr. Chair, if I could ask a question to the manager, somewhat germane.
Councilman Fernandez, go ahead.
And maybe I missed it earlier. I remember you were supposed to bring us potential funding sources for where to pay the $50,000 for the study. Did you identify?
MLOP.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's one of the things that is on my list to ask for an amendment tonight, so that when we bring it back on second reading, we already have that funded. 'Cause
Got
right
it.
now, the decision was made on Tuesday to do the study, but there's no place to fund it from, but that's our recommendation.
So the 140 that I was looking at is already looking like 90 before.
You see how
Understand that,
it whittles away fast.
Councilman Garcia, I think that weighs a little bit on my decision-making process, because if we were at 135 and we needed to get to 160, I'm confident we could do that without a big impact. But if we're at 90 and we got to get to 160, I think we might be out of reach. So I just wanted to put that on the record for.
Madam Clerk, if you can call roll on this question.
Councilmember Garcia.
Yes.
Councilmember Fernandez.
Yes.
Councilmember Dieguez.
No.
Councilmember Collazo.
No.
Councilmember Ruano.
No.
The motion fails.
All right, thank you so much. Any further discussion on the budget?
I'd like that, if somebody would proffer an amendment to fund the police study, to add that to the fiscal '24 budget and fund it the way we recommend.
So moved.
Second.
There is a motion and a second. Any discussion on
Yes.
the allocation? Yes, Councilman Dieguez.
And I just want to put my reasons on the record for the committee members who may go back and watch this with respect to that study. There's no urgency to get that done right now, right? As I understand it, the existing police contract runs through after the election, and there's a state law that even extends it or requires that they would have to honor whatever contract for 3 years after.
The new state law mandates that any new sheriff that is taking over a department that already has a contract arrangement with a municipality like ours, that the new sheriff is obligated to continue services for up to 3 years past when they take over.
And
So
when does our existing contract expire?
I think it's 24, but this council gave me the authority that those are already on the works, for us to extend the existing contract out with the Miami-Dade Police Department before it becomes the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office.
Yeah, so again, just for the committee members there, so they understand, obviously I respect you all immensely and I respect your work, but I think that for right now, we're not going to answer this question immediately about whether we're going to go to our own police department. And the question every year when we have studied this, whether it's 2004 or 2013, is that we get excellent services from the county. Obviously, the different quirk here is who might be the county sheriff. But with that said, we have a tight budget year. We do need to eventually answer this question, but there's no urgency to answer it. And what's more is I was told by the deputy town attorney today that they actually also have a funding request that they need to make to get their legal reserves to capacity. Obviously, that's not germane to this item, so I won't get into a discussion about that right now. But I'll make a motion on his behalf after this one, wherever it goes, and let him explain what their request is. But I just wanted to let them know that it's not that I'm not going to support it, but I'm just not going to support it right now.
Thank you, Councilman Dieguez. Councilman Morano, do you want to opine on this issue?
Yes, Councilmember, thank you so much. I wanted to just state that I would much rather, at this moment, use those funds for overtime, to add on to the overtime amount that we have on our budget, rather than fund this study. I also believe that it's not an urgency. I do think that at some point that might be something that we want to take a look at, but I don't have the appetite for that at this moment. So I would much rather use that funding towards overtime for the police. And then I would also like to add that, just for the sake of expediency, anything that we look to change or anything that we look to add at this point is going to come out of the Optimus Park. That's just the bucket that is available, because our ad valorem dollars are finite. So they're not going to get any better. So any of the things that we discuss or that we have in mind that we want to add, we just have to be cognizant of the fact that the manager's answer is always going to be, it's going to come out of the Optimus Park, because that's just the only thing that is available. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Morano. Any further debate from my colleagues? I do have one issue that I was a big champion of doing the study. I think when you're talking about the biggest line item in the budget, you're almost compelled as a body to revisit it. Whether we assume we know what the answer is or whether the timing is right, I think it's more of an issue of just sound business practice. It's your biggest item that you're going to spend on into perpetuity, and it's always going to be your biggest line item. So I think, I was a big proponent of revisiting it every time that the contract comes up. I actually like revisiting it with a little bit more frequency. I understand the budget constraints. What I was going to add to the item was actually amendment that was inspired by the previous discussion, that if we're going to hire a consultant, we're going to pay the $50,000. Let's have them look into this issue. Are we appropriately staffed? Right? We think that we know what the appropriate staffing levels are. We know that the population growth is coming. We know that the population has already grown. To actually add into that study a forecasting component of if we were going to start a police department, or the police department you have now must have X, Y, and Z, I think that there's a lot of value. There's synergistic value in doing this study. So not only would it back up what the lieutenant is saying, it'll give us a roadmap for the future to ameliorate your concern, Councilman Garcia. I'm sorry, Major,
Councilmember,
yes.
you just demoted him.
I apologize. I am now going to fear for my life as I'm leaving the Major. I apologize. But and that's what I saw it as, an opportunity to give us kind of a roadmap or a strategic plan. I hate using that strategic plan because I think sometimes we use that word and then we say, oh, it's just another thing we're going to put on the shelf. But if we could somehow leverage the study at this time to give us a roadmap to what we need, whether it's our police department now or into the future, I think it might be wise to spend that money.
I think that's very sound, and if you want to formalize it into a motion, I would love to second.
Yeah, it was an amendment to the study.
Second.
Thank you. Any debate just on the amendment? Any debate just on the amendment at this time?
I'll support the amendment.
Councilman Dieguez, thank you. Any debate just on the amendment at this time? Hearing none, all in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The amendment passes. Back to the original motion as amended.
Hearing your reasoning and everything, and thinking back, and I admit I briefly had a lapse of memory there, but being that we're going to be using the carry forward, which I believe is still substantial, to pay back the fund, and because the way that you described the synergies that we can get with the study, I'm going to go ahead and change my position and support the original motion. And again, I think it does provide value, especially the way that you presented it. So I'll go ahead and support it.
Yep.
Thank you, Councilman Dieguez. Yes, Councilman Garcia.
I am incredibly happy with the services that our police departments are giving us now. However, we put together that committee made of professionals that have close to 200 years in service to our community, and I respect their recommendation. So absolutely, if they think a study is necessary, besides the fact that they're the ones that deal with this every day, and we're gonna come through to a decision either way in a couple of years, I will support the study.
Thank you, Councilman Garcia. And I would just want to be clear, it's adding to the initial, I think they were just doing a feasibility study. I think we should also do, a level of service study, so to speak. So I appreciate the support on that.
Here's a word we haven't heard in a while: options.
Oh, of course not, right? I think it's used at every meeting. I actually want on my memorial plaque options. Any further discussion on this item? Councilwoman Morano, I don't know if you want to chime in one final round before we call vote?
No, thank you.
Okay. Madam Clerk, can you take the roll on this, on the motion?
Yes.
As amended.
On the motion to fund the police study by Councilmember Fernandez and seconded by Councilmember Garcia. Councilmember Fernandez.
Yes.
Councilmember Garcia.
Yes.
Councilmember Ruano.
No.
Councilmember Dieguez.
Yes.
Councilmember Collazo.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you. On to back the budget. Any further amendments, deletions?
Well, I think the deputy town attorney wanted to present his request.
Okay, deputy town attorney recognized. Mr. Moneybags.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Traditionally, every single year, we more or less have our budget
somewhere between around 300,000. This year, I understand we've used some of it, and we're looking at going into the new fiscal year at the amount. I think it's about, Mr. Manager, correct me if I'm wrong, it's about 260, the amount that we're moving forward in?
Right now, the amount that you have there now?
Yes, that we're going to be moving forward to the next fiscal
I
year.
think it's 220, right?
206.
206.
206.
So,
Right. So 206 is what's currently budgeted for next year.
that's what you have in there now, and it just carries over from year to year. So,
Correct.
right now, it's
So-
206.
Given some of the litigation, without going too much into it, that we have out there, but we all know what we're facing this coming year, and the trial that we're probably facing. This town and this board this council has always been consistent in protecting our residents, especially against persons that are trying to take the good money and the good tax dollars from our residents. And we do have a pending litigation out there, without going too much into detail. So I had asked if we could please round it up and give us the tools that we need and the reserves and put it back at the 300 level. That's the ask from legal.
I'll make a motion to put it at 250.
Yeah, and I was just going to ask, actually,
Hold on a second.
Yeah.
I'm going to make a motion to put it at 250. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
There's a second, so now there's debate and discussion. Go ahead.
I guess my question through the chair to the attorney is, do you anticipate blowing through the reserves that you have between now and the time we move the carry forward?
When would that be? That would be November?
First reading would be in March, second reading in April.
We're looking at possible trial early next year.
Okay, yeah, no, I'll go ahead and I'll support it.
Any further debate or discussion on the motion to raise the reserves to 250,000?
Yes, I wanted to put my thoughts on the record.
Yes, go ahead.
Two things, right? So, first of all, functionally, what we're doing is we're moving, money from the one place where we have it, which is MLOP, and moving it into litigation reserves. That's an option that we always have at our disposal, right? We're essentially moving from one reserve bucket to another. If you need more, we can consider more at that time. I think 250 is fair. It bumps it up a little bit. And two, I just want to point out, much to Councilman Collazo's point, that somehow the lawyers don't enjoy the same benefit that our police major does in us wanting to throw limitless amounts of money and resources at his department.
Just remember, it's law and order.
Duly noted, but yes, I did want to put those thoughts on the record, but I will be supporting the item as moved.
Thank you, Councilman Fernandez. Councilman Morano, I'm going to go to you because I sometimes have my trepidation that you maybe want to be heard and maybe the audio is not working. Would you like to opine on this issue?
Thank you so much. I wholeheartedly agree with Councilmember Fernandez that we do not enjoy throwing money in this pot. But unfortunately, it's a necessary evil, so I will be supporting it.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I don't see any further debate. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll?
Yes. Councilmember Ruano.
Yes.
Councilmember Collazo.
Yes.
Councilmember Garcia.
Yes.
Councilmember Diegues.
Yes.
Councilmember Fernandez.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you. Any additional discussion or items on this? Yes,
Mr. Chair,
Manager.
the information that you asked from our finance
Oh,
staff.
yes, absolutely.
I
I
have
don't
that
think
in-
it's moot. I think it's also something that we might benefit from because we do have a second hearing. So,
Right.
yes, thank you so
So
much for working on that.
Both the South Point and the Senior Center projects both already applied for permits, even though the Senior Center, they had not done anything yet, but they both applied for permits and paid their impact fees. So they paid, those two projects, the Senior Center and the South Point, paid a total of $926,000. And The portion of that, it was split between park improvement, 475, and open space, 473. So they're for two, even though they're both park, they're for two different purposes. Park improvement is for an existing facility that you want to improve. Park open space would be to acquire new park space.
Okay.
Or buy and improve new park space, that's the open space part.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Manager, and thank you for the staff for doing that diligently. I appreciate that.
Thank you, guys.
I do have one last question to the manager. One of the things that we identify. Oh.
Sorry?
No. I already asked the question. Did you get that answer? Just messing with you, man. Just messing with you. No, what? I was just, one of the things that came up through public comments, and I think it came up during our regular council meeting, the LPR system is something that I think we've all said is something that benefits us. I know that there may be police impact fees that came in. I know that the town council has also motioned that all future police impact fees.
236,000.
Does that close the net?
I don't believe so.
Does that close the fiber?
The entrances?
Yes, does that close the net around the town?
I don't think that everything that we have received closes the net. I believe that our projections are that by the time the remaining projects like Baptist and the golf course come online and pay their impact fees, I think we'll be there or almost there. But I know for security and law enforcement purposes, they don't want to talk too much about where they are and where they're not.
I'm not asking for details, but I am going to ask a very, I guess, a simpleton question, right? With the amount of monies that we've received from police impact fees and with the amount of monies, I think I know the answer, but somebody from the public may ask, why are we paying a lot more per camera than maybe a 6,500, 8,500 start, right? And I think it has to do with the licensing and recurring versus our cameras that are stationary.
We have always just bought them outright and connected them and done it that way. With a contract that the police department, Miami-Dade, I believe it's with a contract that Miami-Dade County has. When the neighborhood service district was considering employing those, in order for them not to have a humongous hit, we went into negotiations with the vendors and to see if they had some kind of a process. So they may, over the long haul, pay a little more, but it allows them to pay it over several fiscal years as opposed to having it be one-time shot.
Got it. So now I'm going to marry the two ideas and create a hybrid. You guys know how much I love hybrids. Not your hybrid type, but options. So can we plug the gap with the lease model, right, at a much lower rate until we get the permanent funds from police impact fees to then go ahead and purchase outright?
Well,
so can you do a short-term rental to address the current gap until the monies come in, and then you can, so again, basically shoring up the net around the entire community without the huge capital investment, and then pull out that short-term rental when the capital investment is there.
Let me work with Jeremy and Major Gonzalez, and let me take a look at it. And
that is something that I'm interested for the second. Second.
I could either
budget.
report on it at the second budget hearing, or just give it to you via email. However,
I'd like a motion for a report at the second budget hearing.
Second.
Will do.
Okay. The second. Any discussion on that?
Nope.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much, Mr. Manager. Yes, Councilman Fernandez, you're recognized.
So I wanted to chime in two things there. One, I think the like a lease with a buyout option, I think is a genius idea. Genius. The second part, I think one of the considerations too, as to why the cost of some of these at the entry points might be higher than the ones that we've looked at the NSDs, is typically the entry points don't have infrastructure, right? They don't have their own power meters, they don't have their own service. So the cost of implementing those might be a little bit higher than the guard gates that already have infrastructure.
thank you for pointing that out. And in my line of questioning, we kind of already known that framework, but it's going to be that question that's going to be answered by the public, and I wanted to make sure that we fleshed it out so they also had the opportunity to understand why maybe an NSD has a startup cost very, very low compared to, but I think we're all working towards the same goal, which is really shoring up that infrastructure around town. So I appreciate it. Any further items on the budget that we need to discuss? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and call the question. Madam Clerk?
Ordinance in first reading, item 7B, Councilmember Fernandez.
Yes.
Councilmember Dieguez.
Yes.
Councilmember Collazo.
Yes.
Councilmember Ruano.
Yes.
Councilmember Garcia.
Yes.
The ordinance in first reading passes.
Thank you very much. We are not adjourned yet. We have an item 7C that I believe we already waived the rules on, correct? Councilman Dieguez, I think you asked for this item.
Yeah, just for discussion, for the benefit of the public. It's my understanding, though, that there's already, some half information being shared in some of the group chats. But I'm going to start with Jeremy, if he can come to the podium, please. Hi, Jeremy. I just wanted to ask you a couple of things about, what the town is recommending, but also, some other points of information. The existing contract with Kent, when would it naturally terminate? When does it expire?
Its last term ends July 31st of 2024, next year.
Next year. And can you give us details as far as what the town is proposing that we do here? What is the recommendation?
So in the recommendation before you, it's essentially accessing the existing contract we have for Miami Lakes Section 1, which was established in 2022. That contract already gives us the authority to go ahead and add additional locations. All we're really looking to amend within that is amending to place Loch Lomond within that contract, as well as actually reduce the roving rate and set it back to a number, I think it's $2.40, rather than what was originally proposed. So by doing so, we would be able to bring in SFM, keeping the 2022 price, which that contract will actually will run through 2025 with 2 more one-year extensions.
So even though would it be safe to say that even though there would be an increased impact to the NSD budget in this fiscal year, would there be a change in the homeowners assessment for fiscal year 23-24?
No.
The next budget year?
No, for the following budget year, no. And then that all depends on the amount of contingency reserve that's chosen to be budgeted that year. Now that we no longer have a minimum of 10%, we can actually carry a lower number and still maintain the assessment rates at their current value.
So then my next question is, you stated earlier that the contract would be expiring next July, which would mean we would have to go back out to bid, right?
Correct.
And therefore, we would have to, or most likely, that NSD would have an increased impact at that point, having to pay newer labor rates and everything else, correct?
It's assumed essentially, but yes, looking further down the road, looking at some of the minimum wage that's going up year by year incrementally, that could be probably the most likely answer, yes.
So in other words, most likely, in your opinion, the rates would go up based on these other factors and whatnot, market rates, including wage rates and everything else?
Yes.
Okay, but again, there would be no impact in the next fiscal year to the individual homeowners, regardless of the switch?
Correct. If we maintain the contract and actually follow the recommendation and go ahead and access the contract, it would guarantee us that contractual rate, and not foreseen having to go out to bid and potentially seeing what the market is at that rate at the time.
And in a way, though, by sticking with, or by doing this change order and piggybacking off of the Section 1 NSD contract that runs even further than the Kent contract, they're actually kind of mitigating some of the risk of that hit that they would otherwise would take were we to go out to bid again with Kent.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Jeremy. Can John, the representative for SFM, come up to the podium, please?
Councilman Diaz, before John comes up, can we give everybody a chance with Jeremy, and then we'll...
Sure, yeah.
Anybody else with questions to staff from the dais? Anybody? Yes, Councilman Fernandez.
I have a question, and it's not to the contract itself, but it is germane to the security issues that have been occurring there, and it might be more for the major than Jeremy. We do have a mobile LPR, correct? We have an LPR on a
Yes.
trailer?
There are two trailers, speed and a trailer.
Correct. Would it be feasible, at least in the short term, to position that mobile LPR at the entrance of
They are in position to
there?
cover, they're like Band-Aids right now.
No, he's asking at the entrance to Loch
At the
Lomond.
entrance to Loch Lomond.
Oh,
You minimize the effectiveness of it because
yeah,
it's in
there's
a,
more
as a,
coverage. It's-
yeah.
It has more coverage
In its current
where it's
location.
in its current location than it would in, it would open up, yeah, it would open up a bigger water, where water, it's a little, this is Loch Lomond, and that's where it's covering now. It's a lot more coverage and protection into the town because it's in one of the main arteries.
All right. So when we move forward with Councilman Collazo's plan to fast-track the LPR network, then we can look at least temporarily shifting it there. Excellent. Thank you.
Councilman Morano, I know that you're online. Do you have any questions to staff regarding the contract change for SFM prior to the SFM representative coming to the podium?
No, sir.
No, thank you very much. Any further questions for staff? Yes, go ahead, Councilman Garcia.
Jeremy, and I guess we can ask the representative, what guarantees are we going to get that there's going to be that communication with our police officers when they see somebody that doesn't belong, or they approach, are they going to call the police? Is there something in the contract currently that Kent wasn't following that allowed us to terminate with cause, that SFM will have to make sure that they're meeting? What are the key indicators that they have to meet with communication with and how do we track that to make sure that they are doing a better job than Kent was doing? I guess that's the question.
So essentially, some of that, John will be able to speak to as far as some of the guarantees moving forward. I can tell you from what has been discussed from the community and some of those points that were left open, or some of those gaps with regard to some of the logs not being legible. SFM's way of protocols of taking down plates and so forth is digital. It's actually images taken and can be retrieved. So it's not an issue of handwriting or any issues of being able to follow up on vehicle logs. That was one item. Essentially,
Question, sorry to interrupt. Now, when you say, is that an app that actually details the number of license plates taken that day, archives them, and is you can look them up?
correct. You
Okay.
can look by timestamps.
Okay.
And go ahead and look for if there was an issue that we saw and PD needs to access how many vehicles or other vehicles that access between this 1 hour. They can go ahead and actually look at the archive for that hour and go play by play looking for the vehicle.
Is it exportable? Can you run reports on that, based on that? Get
Yes.
percentages of
Just wanna make
when,
sure.
especially if we want to see, all of a sudden, there's a uptick in 3 in the morning, people going by at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, that we can share with our, can we
all
share
that-
that with our, can we share that with our police do you currently?
Typically, they
share
have
with-
been, if
with the
there's an
major?
incident, if there's an incident noted, we can go ahead and pull some of those logs and show PD whatever they're looking for.
The question is prior, because usually criminals stake out the area. They go in there, they see, hey, look, there's no cops around, there's nothing going on, and then they come back. Is that a good assessment, Major? Just to see if there's some sort of consistent communication. So if the major sees a trend, hey, why are there more people going in and out by 2 or 3, even it could be 1 or 2 or 3 cars going in at 2 or 3 in the morning on a Tuesday. Last week, there was nobody. Is there a type of communication between SFM and our police? And if not, can there be?
There can be, and that was the other side of it, is the contracts all come with post orders, which are mandated by us. We select essentially what we want the process and protocol to be at every stop, and what should be happening at every guardhouse. Now, those can be amended. We've amended them in the past, talking with our NSD boards and trying to make something that works best for protection and also for ease and making sure that individuals aren't getting stopped, residents aren't getting stopped too long at their gatehouses and so forth.
And then-
So it can be amended.
Okay, and then the last question is, what additional training or is SFM going to give their night and weekend officers when it comes to?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll save that for them.
And I apologize, Councilman Garcia. I just wanted to bifurcate the issue and make sure that when, we have all our questions with you, and then I'm sure that you'll have plenty of questions as well. I do have one question to staff. We have heard of that we're humans, right? And we need to go to the bathroom and relieve ourselves, and sometimes that creates a gap in coverage. Do the post orders that you just spoke about address the human need to go to the bathroom, in the sense that I know Loch Lomond has one guard, one sentinel guard at the gate. They also have the luxury of they have a roaming guard. And I've always understood the post orders to be that when a human needs to go to the bathroom, that's perfectly understandable. Do your post orders address that need at this time?
At this time, no, and that's something we will look towards amending if required, but essentially it would just, it would create the need for the rover to come out of service for those 10, 15 minutes,
Right.
and then be placed back out into the,
So I don't know if you need a motion, but I would be one to make sure that when you amend those post orders, that we leverage the fact that this community has a rover, and that if somebody needs to leave that guard gate, that residents aren't finding that guard gate unmanned.
the guard gate is never unmanned.
Well,
So in the case of Loch Lomond, the rover would be brought to the front of
Yeah.
the gate, and then.
He may not have understood you.
Yeah.
That was my initial
Yeah,
question.
and then excuse, yeah, and then it would excuse the guard from the gate. to
We
go
we
into
have
the-
heard in public debate in the past how the guard gate may at times be left unmanned because guards need to go to the bathroom. And I think that's a very sound point, that the guard gate being left unmanned and a guard gate being left open completely unmanned is not something that's acceptable. So I just wanted to make sure that that was implicit and that you had the tools within the contract to mitigate that if that was a concern that should arise in the future. So that's it. You ameliorated my concern.
If I can get two more follow-up questions.
Sure.
Eh,
Go
it-
ahead, Councilman.
Thank you. Does SFM currently provide roving guards at any of our
No.
other? So this would be a new type of service that,
Well, they provide it to
for other communities, right,
correct.
but as far as we're concerned.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, we have something similar that they provide as a part of their quality assurance. It's not contractually required, where they do community patrols. So it would be essentially a community patrol, but contracted and 24/7.
Excellent. And the second question is, do we have a mechanism in the contract that would allow us, should the residents of Loch Lomond decide to replace the roving guard with a police officer or some other type of service, do we have recourse to be able to eliminate the roving guard from the contract?
Yeah, it would be an amendment to the scope of services provided.
Okay, but under the current contract,
Under the current
it would provide for that. Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
I also have some follow-up questions.
Councilman Dieguez.
Thank you. But I do have a comment, though, that by contract, sure, you can do that, but again, remember that these are all governed by the scope of the ordinances that created the NSDs. So in the case of Loch Lomond, that might be a little difficult in terms of replacing them with police officers. But with that said, I had two things that I forgot to ask you. One of them is, if there were to be a switch, would there also be an ability to terminate for convenience, very similar to what we have currently with Kent? In other words, that we just need to provide 30 days notice for any reason, we can terminate.
If I'm not mistaken, it's the exact same clause, A501, but yes.
Got it.
The
And then
answer
my
is yes.
second.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. And my second question is, in your experience, how has your interactions been with SFM? And do you, and again, I just want your honest opinion. I don't want you to feel like you're throwing anybody under the bus. But, first, what has been your experience in dealing with problematic guards and problematic issues with SFM? And then secondly, what has been your experience with SFM on that note compared to Kent?
In the regards to staffing and the individuals that are working for SFM and any issues that have arisen from that, SFM has been quick to respond. If there is a case in which the town perceives it's a repeat offender, an issue with one of their guards, they have never shied away from removing the guard from service within the town, to making sure that our quality of security service is being met. So if it means having to get rid of a guard from one of our locations, they haven't given us any pushback to date. We have worked through any issues with one-time issues. They've also received fines and major and minor fines, but they have made jumps in reducing the amount of issues, and they've always been there to work with us to date. I have since stepped out of the day-to-day role, and now I've had in the past Christina and now John kind of handling that, so they would speak a little bit more directly with SFM. They're not here right now.
Yeah, but I think those are also good questions with respect to quality control to.
No, I do
SFM.
plan to ask the representative, his perspective. I'm trying to get from the town's perspective. what
Absolutely. No, I
their
understand.
experience
Yeah,
has been up
yeah.
to date. And then in comparison with Kent, have they
Start
been
getting
about the
ready.
same? though, in terms of responsiveness? You know, have you gotten a little bit more out of one than the other? And again, I'm just trying to make a decision here, you know, that eventually, so.
Looking at the time that I've spent working with the NSDs, on average, Ken was taking longer to provide responses to certain issues and sometimes deliverables when we needed documents.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
One last time for staff. Councilwoman Morano, one last time for staff. Anybody? Okay, thank you so much, Jeremy. Yes, if you can please come to the podium. We have the representative from SFM. If you can introduce yourself, please.
Thank you. My name is John Frensdorf. I'm the Vice President of Security Operations for SFM Security.
I'll recognize the council members going from my right to left. So go ahead, Councilman
Thank you so
Garcia.
much for being here and for all the services you do provide the city.
Thank you
I mean,
so
the
much.
town already. I guess the questions, I'm sure you're aware why we're here.
Yes.
And the concerns of the residents. Can you tell us what you feel the concerns are, why we're considering SFM to take over from Kent, and what 2 or 3 things you're going to do to try to address the issues, especially in the overnight hours for the residents of Loch Lomond, if you don't mind.
Sure. So the reason why I'm here is because residents for Loch Lomond have expressed concerns about how security is enforced in their guardhouse and the rover position. They believe that current security coverage provided is not addressing security issues that have been open and disclosed in the past, to include not enforcing proper control procedures at the guardhouse, and the rover not basically fulfilling the expectations for the community. We have been providing services to Town of Miami Lakes for an extensive period of time, and we have experience managing the guardhouses. We have developed a procedure that allows us to capture the images of all vehicles entering through the guardhouse, which expedites that process and allows us to capture quality information, which furthermore allows us to also build statistics that can be provided based on any period of time that needs to be disclosed. By providing that information, we are able to determine what are the peak days and what are the peak hours. So that also allows us to monitor our security officers in a way that, you know, basically allows us to utilize resources at the right time. So what we're going to be doing to address these issues is, number one, hiring officers that have experience both in a rover and in a guardhouse capacity, understanding that these are 2 different roles. We're going to try to cross-train them so that we can have some type of rotation during the day between them, understanding that performing a certain role for 8 hours can be distracting and not allow them to focus on the nature of the job. And we're also going to be reinforcing our security officers with field supervisors who are going to be visiting the community frequently in what we call community patrols that allow them to basically provide oversight to the work that is being done by our rover and our guardhouse. In addition to that, we're going to be installing cameras in the guardhouse that are going to be monitoring not only the performance of the officer in the guardhouse, but also monitoring the inbound and the outbound. So whenever pictures are not taken for any reason that may be technology or any other, we also have a video coverage for that information. So those are all concurrent measures that will allow us to improve the quality of services in the community.
Thank you for that. That's a very detailed explanation. I appreciate it. My last follow-up question is, what are the steps you're taking to improve communication with our police force? The rules of engagement when it comes to somebody walking through the neighborhood in the middle of the night. I know it's an open, it's a public road. However, what are you telling your officers to do when they see people jumping in from the golf course or people that, late at night? What's your procedures?
As you know, a private security officer's main mission is to observe and report.
Okay.
On the reporting feature, we have a field supervisor. We have a 24/7 security operations center that monitors our activities. And of course, we immediately call the police whenever we identify any behavior that is found to be, out of the ordinary. Now, of course, we also understand and are mindful of the fact that the police have limited resources. But what we will do is simply report everything that we find unusual. We will monitor from a distance, and we will basically wait for the police to engage. We are not going to be engaging. That's not part of our rules and the way we operate.
Thank you.
Thank you, man. And I'm going to go same format. Not going to bounce around, same format, and then we'll do another pass if we have to. I do have one, maybe two questions. You heard my point of emphasis with the town staff. In your sense, do you foresee any circumstance in that particular community, not any other community, but in that particular community, where the guard gate would be left unmanned or unattended, or the guard's gates just left open for somebody to come in unsupervised?
The only reason why I could see that it would be unmanned, given the fact that we have a rover that is going to be providing support, would be some kind of medical emergency that the security officer is facing, something unexpected, something that is sudden. But other than that, maybe a vehicle malfunction where the rover cannot, get in time to the guardhouse in order to provide relief. But we're talking about extreme circumstances. These are not day-to-day usual activities.
From your response, what I gathered is a guard collapses while he's working, right?
Yeah,
and at that moment in time, that person is unresponsive. That's, like you said, it's an extreme. But even to that point, what you have heard, what I heard you also say is there is even a redundancy built into the system where you have a backup plan for that as well,
Yes.
where even if it's unmanned because a guard collapsed, somehow the tag's going to be recorded. So I'm pretty comfortable with that response.
And sorry, and as far as the arm gate remaining open, is obviously due to a malfunction of the arm gate. And we have had experience with that in the other communities, where unfortunately the arm gate is damaged or fails to operate. So we have a procedure in place where the security officer will use a hand wand that requires the vehicle to stop. And there's a manual signal for the vehicle to stop for the procedure to be enforced.
Great.
If that fails, we usually use cones in order to have vehicles stop, complete the procedure, and remove the cone to allow them in.
Great. One of the complaints that I heard, I believe it was from Ms. Farah during her testimony on that night, was that because of the positioning of cameras or the lighting in that particular area, you get some white screen or are your cameras visible at night, or is the system going to be able to read the plates at night? And I'm assuming that it's yes, but are you fairly confident that regardless whether there's headlights, no headlights, brake lights on, your system will capture everything regardless of the situation that's there?
Yeah, the cameras will have night vision capability, so they even operate with poor lighting. I mean, they're designed to even operate without lighting at all. So yeah, the technology is available and will be implemented.
Great. I have two last questions. When there's a critical incident, the community has right now depended on the homeowners association camera system. Would your system replace that system, or would it be on top of that system?
No, it's going to be on top of any system that exists right now.
Okay.
We are actually in the process of enhancing our cameras at all the guardhouses that we operate at Town of Miami Lakes. So this is not something that we're only doing exclusively for this community, but for all communities. because again, we want to make sure that there is absolutely no ambiguity of the fact that we're going to be capturing all the license plates for all the vehicles that are entering all communities.
Well, we appreciate that reinvestment in our community, and I'm sure that the residents of special taxing districts feel the same. To that point, if there's a critical incident and a resident wanted to review or ask, do you guys facilitate that type of information for the resident, or is that strictly through the town of Miami Lakes?
We report everything through Jeremy and John. So I'm sure that if the request comes from the town, because ultimately the town is our customer, we will facilitate that information. Yes.
Okay, I appreciate it. And that maybe that will be a follow-up to Jeremy. Is that public information?
That's what I was discussing
Yeah.
earlier with the deputy town attorney. That's something we would look into as far as if it were through the contract being given to the town, if it becomes public record, and what are somewhat of the safeguards for those videos and images.
Okay, I appreciate it. My final question, and I guess if it's an issue that is just a curiosity to me. I know the presence that you have in our community. I know the presence and the protection that you offer. Are there any other communities in Miami-Dade County that you offer security guard services for special taxing districts, Coral Gables by the Sea, any other community where you offer this particular service?
We provide security services for Village of Palmetto Bay, and I believe that's the only other one.
Okay, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Yes, Councilman Fernandez and Councilman Dieguez, and we'll go to Councilwoman Morano.
Thank you, Chair. Question. So the roving guard, what kind of vehicle would they? Is it a car that they rove in? Is it a golf cart? What?
Yes, it is going to be an SUV.
Okay.
And it's going to have strobe lights. And
is it marked?
It is marked with our company's name. There is no ambiguity about it being a marked security vehicle. Yes.
Is there any camera equipment on the vehicle, either a dash cam or?
No.
Okay. Yeah. No, I mean I think that might be something to consider if it's.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it's beneficial to providing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a good idea, and the vehicle also has a GPS that allows us to track that vehicle, and on top of the GPS that the vehicle has, our devices, our phone devices, are also GPS enabled because the security software that we utilize also has that capability.
That was my next question was going to be on tour software. So it sounds like you're definitely using that, correct?
Yeah, we try to implement a paperless environment where all our reports are generated through the software, and we have the capability of emailing those reports on time and live, meaning that we don't have to wait until the next business day to report on something. So Jeremy or John will get emails at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning, basically because something happened at that time. They don't have to wait until the following day.
Right. But we should be able to pull statistics if the rover is GPS tracked. We should be able to pull statistics as far as the frequency of the patrols and where they were at a particular time. And excellent.
We are also going to be implementing checkpoints. So the expectation is that the rover is going to be hitting on these checkpoints at any given time of the night, and we may also dictate that if we want to emphasize a certain area within the community, they will be able to hit those checkpoints more frequently based on that directive that they.
And that's going to require that they exit the vehicle to do that, or are they going to be able to?
Well, depending on the location of the checkpoint, they may be required to exit the vehicle, and if that's something that we want them to do, then yeah, absolutely.
Right.
So sometimes we will put them at locations that require them to walk a certain distance. So they'll park the car, they'll go and make an observation, and we will even require them to answer a question when they reach that checkpoint. So for instance, if we're telling them to stop at a certain location and walk 20 or 30 yards to hit on a light post, they may have to answer a question, is the light post on?
Right.
Is it lighting properly? Is there anything that you need to
Or
report?
if you're going to a pocket park at midnight, is anyone at the park?
Exactly.
Something like that. Got it?
Yeah, we can introduce those questions.
Okie dokie. I think that answers most of my questions. Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
You're doing great so far. Let's go.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of some of the questions I had are being addressed as well. But I guess what I also wanted to ask is, there was a situation that I was told by a resident that they experienced, wherein the existing security company, Kent, with their rover, ran out of gas. So what would be the protocol for you to address that you would implement to address the situation to make sure that the rover's always fueled up and ready to go, so that there's no gap and in terms of the rover service?
Yeah, so normally at the beginning of the shift, and we have 3 shifts a day because they run 8-hour shifts, we are requesting that they do a vehicle inspection, which includes reporting on the level of gas on the vehicle. So when we identify that the level of gas is at 1/4 tank or less, we immediately dispatch our field supervisor, who goes on his own vehicle to the site. They're going to swap vehicles so the rover is not interrupted at no point in time, can continue performing his rounds. And the field supervisor will take that vehicle to be fueled at the nearest gas station, bring it back, and then swap them back. So that assures that there's never going to be interruption in service, and the rover will continue performing his duties.
Thank you. And I'm going to pose a scenario to you to try and ascertain what the company expects of their employee in this situation. If there is an individual that doesn't appear to belong to the community, and trust me, in Loch Lomond, you'll know fairly quickly, what would be the protocol there? Do they report it to the rover? What are they supposed to do if they see someone that doesn't seem to belong to the area? And I know that involves some degree of profiling, but obviously we're just trying to keep the community safe. What would they do in that situation?
If it's the guardhouse officer, we obviously are going to ask him to call the rover so he has a backup. And also he's going to immediately reach out to our field supervisor, and we're going to keep a distance from the subject. We're going to try to document everything that we're seeing with our phones, and we're going to be calling the police.
And that would apply to if the rover sees something suspicious, they would call the officer?
If the rover sees something suspicious, well, he's not going to be able to call the guardhouse officer because obviously he has no mobility. So he's immediately going to call our field supervisor and the police.
Got it. And then, excuse me, let me look through my questions here. Oh, yeah. So there was a policy at some point with the existing company that just was inconsistently applied with respect to visitors after a certain time in the evening. I think it was 10 or 11 p.m. Has Jeremy already spoken with you about continuing a policy of asking them where they're going, even obviously they can't deny them entry? Are you going to continue the policy of asking them, where are you visiting?
Yes, my understanding is that between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m., which is the 3rd shift, we're going to be demanding that everyone that comes to the community indicates where they're going to be going. In case the person fails to provide the name of a resident or an address, we're going to be instructing our rover to follow that vehicle so that we can determine where the subject is going. If that person were to exhibit suspicious behavior, we're going to be reporting that case to the police so they have the authority to intervene the subject.
I think Jeremy wants to clarify.
Yes. And just for clarification, that is one of our proposed items on the post orders that we are looking to amend and actually kind of codify that. However, I am still waiting to finalize legal review on some of that.
Well, I guess, is the attorney here? Yeah. So obviously the discussion's ongoing, you're doing your research, but I guess it's a public road, but obviously there's a guard gate. You're being forced to stop. And you're providing information, which is your tag, right? By continuing on, you are consenting, to go ahead and give this information. So, I mean, what I would, and I'm sure you're going to consider this, which is how, I don't see, at least to me, and maybe this is more me just talking rather than actually asking a question, but I guess my point is that seems to be, that was a good idea. When I first heard that they were doing it, that seems just fine. You're asking them to provide information, much as they would with the tag. You're just now actually asking for it. And then obviously, if they give you the address, that's fine. And if they don't, it's still fine because they're going to get through, right? You know, you're not denying them access. They're just going to be surveilled on the way to the house. But I understand you guys are going to wait to finalize that. But at least to me, it seems the equivalent of getting information of the tag, right? Just that this time you're asking for that as opposed to, just involuntarily, I guess, giving it.
So that's a great question. There is, and I don't know, I have read it in the past, attorney general opinion on point with regards to the limitations that guard gates in special taxing districts have. And one of the things that was discussed in that opinion was the requesting of a license or the requesting of where you're going to go and the questions. And all those are appropriate. You can ask all those questions. What you can't do is, if they don't answer, is deny them entry because it is a public road.
Well, that's exactly what we just went over, and I think that was what the gentleman, John, was mentioning, which is that would be their protocol. It's just like, look, okay, that's fine. You don't want to give me the address, or you don't know it, that's okay, you may proceed, but they're going to call, I guess, their guy and say, hey, let us know where they end up, kind of thing.
And that's appropriate.
Yeah. Show me your papers.
Operationally, we kind of are already working on the background to put that into the post orders. I'm just waiting. Once we get finally fully vetted, we'll go ahead and look at that amendment.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you, because that was another thing I was told to ask about. And then I guess my my last question, my last question is one of the things that I mentioned on Tuesday that I really want to avoid, because I think it was one of my colleagues, I forgot who, mentioned that you're going to be drawing from the same pool of people, and my main concern is that, okay, with Kent, I know that there were some individuals that received praise from some of the residents in Loch Lomond that worked for Kent, but I really, outside of those people, and I don't know if Jeremy knows who they are or not, but outside of those people, I would like to ask you, are you willing to stand on the record that you will not hire, former Kent employees that were previously working at Kent at that district, because that would kind of make this a pointless exercise, I feel.
Sure. No, as a matter of fact, ever since we learned about this opportunity, we have pretty much selected our team already.
Okay. All right. No further questions.
Thank you, Councilman Dieguez. Councilwoman Morano, you're recognized if you have any questions for the gentleman from SFM.
Thank you, Chairman. I think that all of my questions have been answered at this time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Do any of my other colleagues have any additional, no? No. Thank you so much. I mean, I'm going to be quite honest with you. I'm very impressed with your presentation and the responses you gave, so thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Councilman Dieguez, back to you in closing on your item.
Again, this was just a discussion. I agree. I like a lot of what I'm hearing, and there were a lot of, I thought you answered them pretty well. And I like the fact that even if you have a guard gate operator, an actual person that, for example, is deficient in their performance, it sounds like you've built in a bunch of redundancies in there. Because I know one of the issues that was going on is that with the current company, they were logging the tags by hand, and in the recent incident that occurred there, they couldn't even read the chicken scratch from the guards, and so that's just complicated the investigation further. So at least by having the redundancy of the cameras, which I didn't even know you were going to be bringing, I like that. And I like the fact again that they're going to be taking photos, and that's going to be part of a digital archive and everything else. So it sounds like, again, the redundancy aspect, to human errors, I really like. But now, let's wait and see what the residents that show up at the next budget hearings tell us, and we'll make a final decision at that point. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Councilman Dieguez. Yes, and last, before you leave, if you could make yourself available at that time as well, because while our concerns are our concerns, I'm pretty sure that the people who want to pay for that service and may have some of the same questions, and you might have to regurgitate, but they might also have some others. So if you can be available for that meeting as well, we'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you. Any additional business on our agenda? Seeing none,
To the chair, may I ask the manager a question?
you're recognized, Councilman.
In the interim, while we get to the second budget meeting and Kent is still the security guard, what I'm concerned is, and not that Kent would do this, I'm not familiar with Kent, but just in case there's a lax of of meeting their expectations, could we perhaps ask the major to maybe increase?
Yeah, and we'll do it with our staff too. Our vigilance over their operation will increase.
Perfect. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take a moment of personal privilege before adjournment. I want to thank all the staff, Melissa, your work, town manager, all your staff that have worked diligently on this, listening to us, being diligent, coming back with recommendations. And I want to thank my colleagues for the collegiality, making sure that we understood where each other stood, and no posturing. I really appreciate that, and I think we did some great work here tonight. So, in closing, I'm very happy with how the meeting turned out, and I appreciate all the hard work everybody's put in. Thank you so much. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.